When Democrats take the debate stage in Miami over the next 2 nights, they'll be doing so in a city already facing the effects of climate change. South Florida governments have already spent millions of dollars on water pumps and tidal valves just to keep the streets from flooding on sunny days. And in late 2017, 72 people died in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma, which brought heavy rain and strong winds to South Florida and the Keys. Climate scientists say that warmer ocean temperatures and rising seas are making hurricanes more intense. Joining me now to talk about the issues facing South Florida is WFOR political correspondent Jim DeFede. All right, Jim, so let's start with some context, first of all, when it comes to climate change. Give us a sense of why Miami in particular, and that area, is so vulnerable to the effects of climate change.
Look, Miami Beach, if you think about it, was built on a sandbar. The city of Miami as well is at a low-lying area. You are talking about parts of a town here that flood when there's no rain even in the sky. You know, we get these tidal moon waves that come up and just sort of end up bubbling up, and you can end up with 1 foot or 2 of water in some streets on perfectly clear days because of the sea level coming in. So it's a major issue here. It's one that both the city and county are trying to address, trying to look forward to. You know, there's been a lot of steps taken on Miami Beach, but this is really ground zero. They're trying to experiment with a lot of different things here.
So Washington Governor Jay Inslee, who has made climate policy a central focus of his campaign, visited Miami's Little Haiti neighborhood yesterday to talk with activists about gentrification driven by climate change. Jim, can you explain what climate gentrification is and why Little Haiti was the place he chose to talk about it?
So here's the great irony. Little Haiti and the surrounding area has always been an impoverished part of Miami. It's one of the poor neighborhoods. It's often been described as crime-ridden. It is an area in deep despair and blight. The one thing that it has going for it is it's at the highest point of land in South Florida. So it actually is becoming very valuable land because it sits up higher than the rest of the city. So as a result, you've got investors and others now looking to take advantage of the low-hanging fruit in that community, you know, impoverished areas, to go in and buy up entire blocks and city streets, hoping to develop there, thinking in the long term, this is going to be the land that people will want to settle on.
Interesting. Well, Jim, as we mentioned earlier in the show, several Democratic candidates are visiting the Homestead Detention Center south of Miami, where more than 2,300 migrant teens are being held. We've seen how this issue is played out nationally, but how is it seen by locals in South Florida?
Well, I think one of the first things you have to sort of keep in mind about Miami-Dade County in particular is that we are the largest county in the state, in the country rather, that is actually majority foreign-born. 52% of the population in South Florida, in Miami-Dade in particular, was born in a different country. So this is a community of immigrants. So what's happening at the Homestead Detention Center, which is the largest detention center for migrant children, the only for-profit detention center as well, is really striking close to home for a lot of different people. So what you've seen is you've seen all of the candidates, as you've been reporting, trek down to Homestead for sort of a bit of a PR stunt, but also to call attention to the issue. But locally, this is an issue near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. We've had those experiences before. We saw the Cubans coming in the 60s, again in the 80s. You saw the Haitians come here. The Venezuelans have come in more recent years, and you're continuing to see the inflow from Latin America. So this is something that we live and deal with every single day here in South Florida.
So speaking of which, what is it that voters in that part of the country want to hear when it comes to U.S. relations and Venezuela and Cuba?
So look, what you've got is you've got this classic riff where Cuban Americans tend to be more conservative in their views. They tend to vote Republicans. They tend to be the outlier among Hispanics for Democrats and Republicans to look at. It's one of the reasons why Vice President Mike Pence was here in South Florida on Tuesday announcing the launching of Latinos for Trump. This is an area that he thinks he can do well in because of the Cuban population. Now also the Venezuelan population here is becoming wooed by both Democrats and Republicans. Traditionally, Venezuelans have voted for Democrats, but what you're seeing now is you're seeing Donald Trump make a heavy play for them by acting very tough against the Maduro regime in Venezuela. In part, it also helps them with the base in Americans here in South Florida, because you know, the Cuban Americans see the fight with Venezuela as a proxy fight with the Castro regime in Cuba as well. So by going hard against Venezuela, by taking a tough stand against them, the president buttresses his support among Cubans and is trying to woo those Venezuelans over. Democrats, though, you can expect to probably hear a lot of tough language against Venezuela tonight as well from many of the presidential candidates. They've taken a tough stand, too. They're not willing to concede the Venezuelan vote to Donald Trump right away.
So looking at the calendar, Florida's primary is not until March 17th, placing it after at least 26 other primaries and caucuses. So will Floridians even have the chance to vote for many of the candidates they'll see on stage tonight and tomorrow?
That's a great question. I doubt most of these candidates are still going to be in the race by the time Florida turns around. This is one of the ironies of having the candidates here. Traditionally, you know, presidential candidates only come to South Florida to tap into our rich donor base. They come in, they hold fundraisers, and then they get out of town because the Florida primary has never really been pivotal in any of these races. But now, because of the debate being held in Miami, and let me just sort of explain to you why the debate is being held in Miami. Yes, you can make the argument that immigration is important here, health care is a vital issue here, climate change is a vital issue here. But really, let's face it, Miami is hosting the first presidential debate because this is a consolation prize because we lost the Democratic National Convention. It went elsewhere. So as a bone that the Democratic Party threw to Miami, we get to host the first debate here. So as a result, all the candidates are spending time here. They set up camp here. They're holding events here because the national press is here. And so Floridians are seeing all these presidential candidates in a way they're not used to seeing presidential candidates coming through Florida because, as you noted, our primary is so late in the process.
Well, Jim, we know that these are Democratic debates tonight, of course, but the president kicked off his campaign in Orlando last week. You mentioned Latinos for Trump, which, for the record, back in 2016 was the name of a CBSN original that we did. In any case, how invested is the Trump campaign when it comes to your state, which has played such a key role?
Well, look, not too long ago, I talked to Brad Parscale, who's the campaign manager. You know, he said that as far as he's concerned, Florida is must win. If they do not win Florida, they do not think they will win re-election to the White House. So they are all in terms of investing in Florida, getting a ground game together here and doing everything they can to win. They've got some wind at their backs right now. They're feeling good about Florida in part because the president came out early in the governor's race last year to support Ron DeSantis, who went on to win the governor's race. This state is trending a little bit more conservative in a lot of ways. And the thing that I think a lot of people tend to forget about Florida is the key in a lot of these other states that Democrats are going to target are younger voters, Hispanic voters, black voters. They're trying to, you know, appeal to more progressive voters. In Florida, I still keep trying to remind people, the key voting bloc in Florida are older voters. Older voters aren't looking for radical change. Older voters just want to sort of come to Florida, you know, settle here, retire here, move forward with their life. They're not looking for a radical shakeup. So in some ways, the more radical elements of the Democratic Party that are playing to we will change things around, that may not be a great message in Florida for some of those communities in Florida that are looking for just sort of like an even hand right now. That's where Joe Biden may do a little bit better in Florida than some of the other candidates.
Really interesting point, and we'll keep that in mind as we watch these debates unfold. Jim DeFede in Miami. Jim, always so great to have your insight. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.